It's OPB Politics Now for Friday, August 18th. With two quiet vetoes, Governor Tina Kotek has slowed the push to decriminalize sex work in Oregon. And it turns out the city of Portland's top public safety official has been living in Sin City, not Stumptown. On today's show, we'll give you the how and why on both of these stories. I'm Anna Griffin, an editor at OPB.
I'm Alex Zielinski, Portland politics reporter for OPB.
And I'm Jonathan Levinson. I cover policing for OPB.
Jonathan, let's start with you and the world's oldest profession. Many people may not know it, but the governor of Oregon has line item veto power over the state budget. And this year, Governor Kotek used that power to tap the brakes on a movement to decriminalize sex work.
Yes, in total, she vetoed $600,000 in public funding for two studies. Lawmakers approved $100,000 for a study by the Oregon Criminal Justice Commission to consider the pros and cons of decriminalizing sex work. They also budgeted $500,000 for Oregon Health and Science University to do a study looking at the impact of Oregon's sex work laws on people in the sex trade. And Kotek vetoed both, saying that there's value to understanding how these laws disproportionately impact communities of color, but she doesn't think it is the most pressing public health emergency, and she would like the studies to be privately funded.
Let's take a step backward. When we say decriminalize sex work, what are we actually talking about?
Well, let's actually take a step even further back and emphasize that we are talking about consensual sex work. We're talking about adults who do this work by choice. That is completely different from people who are forced into this work, child exploitation, trafficking, things like that. The distinction between people who choose sex work and trafficking is often muddied when discussed by law enforcement and the media, but there's evidence from other countries where sex work laws have been relaxed that decriminalization can actually make it harder for traffickers to operate. As for what decriminalization means, currently prostitution, that's offering or engaging in sexual conduct in exchange for a fee, is a Class A misdemeanor. So solicitation, the buyer side, paying for sex, is also a Class A misdemeanor. Decriminalizing sex work would presumably end those penalties. It would mean sex workers who are doing this work by choice could come out of the shadows and be offered all of the rights and protections that the rest of us have. Right now, consensual sex workers can't prove their income, so housing is challenging. Getting loans for things like cars is impossible. Access to healthcare is more difficult. All of these things that we all take for granted are much harder when your source of income is illegal. And consensual sex workers say their work's legitimate, not a public safety threat, it can be safe, it's a flexible, good-paying job, and these laws are antiquated, need updating.
Do we know how often prosecutors actually charge people with these crimes?
We do. I actually just got statewide numbers less than an hour ago. In 2017, there were 169 cases filed in the state where at least one of the charges was prostitution. That number has decreased steadily since then. Last year, there were 27 charges filed in the state. So that's charges against people offering sex for a fee. For solicitation, in 2017, there were 119 cases with solicitation as one of the charges, and that has gone down too, though not as much. Last year, there were 91 charges filed. And sex workers will tell you that, when their clients get charged, it also puts them at risk, right? For one, if a client gets caught with a different sex worker, they still worry that police might connect them to the client. And they're losing a client, right? That's more than just income. It takes time to get safe, vetted clients. And if one gets arrested, now that sex worker has to put themselves out there. They have to take a chance with a new client, potentially subject themselves to an unsafe situation.
So let's say decriminalization goes before the voters at some point in the future and passes. What does the world look like under that change?
Well, it's tough to answer that question because these studies were supposed to help answer that. There isn't currently a policy proposal on the table. It would probably mean, like I said, that those criminal penalties would go away and consensual sex workers and their clients would no longer be targeted by law enforcement. Representative Rob Noce proposed legislation in 2021 to decriminalize sex work, and that bill repealed the state's ban on prostitution, solicitation, and promoting sex work. But never got a hearing, stalled in committee, so we don't actually know. We have some evidence from other countries, some things we can learn. New Zealand decriminalized sex work in 2003. A study there found that with that change, sex workers were safer. They were more likely to report dangerous, exploitative situations. And in the Netherlands, they found the ability to license and regulate consensual sex work, improve public health, and made it harder for traffickers to operate.
Governor Kotek didn't come right out in her vetoes and say, I'm haunted by ballot measure 110. But the shadow of that ballot measure that decriminalized most small drug possession in Oregon is clearly looming over this debate.
Yeah, it definitely is. I feel like I've said this quite a bit in the past year or so, but just 13 weeks elapsed between voters approving Measure 110 and the law taking effect. That is a very short time to unravel decades of policy, stand up entirely new systems for addiction treatment. Such a short time, in fact, that it didn't happen. So it hasn't really gone the way supporters had hoped. And while those systems are just now kind of finally starting to catch up to demand, I think legislators may have soured on the concept of decriminalization a little. But supporters say, that's one reason why these studies are so important, right? Measure 110 was done fast with almost no planning. Studying the state's prostitution laws, that's kind of seen as the first step for a methodical process to start a conversation, to engage the public, to draft policy proposals, and maybe go about making these changes in a more thoughtful way than with 110.
So the governor has said no public money for these two studies. What's next for advocates of this policy change?
They're going to do what the governor said. They're trying to find private funding and still hope to do these studies.
Okay, thanks, Jonathan. Alex, this week you wrote about the unusual work arrangement enjoyed up until recently by Mike Myers. My first question, who is Mike Myers and why do I care where he lives?
So Myers is the director of Portland's Community Safety Division, which is a relatively new department created to essentially streamline work done by the city's multiple public safety bureaus like police and fire and 911. His job also includes overseeing the city's gun violence prevention program and its homelessness response, which are arguably the city's biggest and top concerns in recent years. So for leading such on-the-ground and community-centric work, it seems important that he lives in town.
In both the public and the private sector, the rules changed during COVID. Now they're changing back. Remind us how the city of Portland's policies about where you work have evolved over time.
Yeah, so for 2020 to much of 2022, city employees were allowed to work remotely, especially because most city buildings were shuttered. That started to change earlier this year. In April, the city required all staff to work at least 20 hours per week in person, unless they had an approved exemption. And Myers was granted that kind of waiver in May with the sign-off of Mayor Ted Wheeler, who oversees his department.
So walk us through what we know about Myers' living arrangements in the last period of time.
Right. So a little background first. Myers served as Las Vegas's fire chief until 2013. So he owned a house in Vegas until then. As far as we know, that was the last time that he owned property in Nevada until now. After that, he spent some time as a fire chief in a town in Missouri, and then he was hired as Portland's fire chief in 2016. He lived in Portland until leaving that job until 2019 and then moved to the Oregon coast. We know he was hired by the city to lead the new community safety division in 2021 when he moved back and started renting a Portland apartment. But less than a year later, in February 2022, he bought a condo in a gated community in Henderson, Nevada, which is a suburb to the southeast of Las Vegas. He also bought a condo in Portland in September of that year. So we don't know how much time that he spent in Nevada in 2022 working remotely, but we know that after getting a waiver to not have to return to the office in April, he worked nearly full-time in Nevada for about 2 months.
We've talked before about this philosophical debate over where people in public safety live. It's been a point of contention over the years with civil rights advocates that many Portland police officers, for example, don't live in the city. Many live a long way from the people they're paid to protect. Do folks concerned about public safety and homelessness and gun violence in Portland think Myers' remote work has impacted the way he does this very important job?
Yeah, that has definitely come up. I spoke with a longtime gun violence prevention activist who said he doubted that Myers could be effective at his job addressing, record shooting trends while not actually living in the community. A lot of the work is meeting with families and being on the ground after a shooting. At the same time, I heard from other people involved in that work who say that they haven't seen Myers' commitment to the work change at all while working remote, and that he's a passionate public servant.
And we should note, Myers was a very popular fire chief when he ran Portland Fire. And has he been accused of actually doing anything wrong?
No, which I think I mean, he's the first person to tell you that, and me. He's followed all of the policies by getting that exemption. He, checked all the boxes necessary to live and work in Nevada. And he hasn't spent, I think what's important is he hasn't used any city money to travel between his two homes.
Has the mayor explained his reasoning on letting someone so high up in the administration, somebody he's given so many responsibilities, work from Nevada?
Not really. He has told us that he believes Myers is able to do his job fine while working in Nevada and that he didn't break any city policies by doing so. He doesn't seem to think it's an issue.
Where does Mike Myers live now?
So according to his staff, he lives in Portland at the condo that he bought last year. His Nevada condo is up for sale, but it's worth noting that he's still registered to vote in Nevada, not Oregon.
Let's leave it there for the moment. Thank you both. This episode of OPB Politics Now was produced by Andrew Thiem and engineered by Nalene Silva. Our music comes from Audio Network. For more political news from around the Pacific Northwest, visit our website anytime. That's opb.org. And there is one more important thing you can do there. Become a sustaining member of OPB. It's the single best way to support Politics Now and all of our journalism. Thanks for your support. Thanks for listening. And we will be back in your feed next week.